Evolution of calendars in ancient times. Archaeologists from Britain announced in 2013 that they had uncovered the world's earliest calendar. The discovery was made at Warren Field in Scotland, where 12 pits were found to be aligned with the southeast horizon. These pits were used by hunter-gatherers to track the height and stage of the moon, which allowed them to keep time in relation to the sun and the changing seasons. The pits pointed towards a hill that was associated with the sunrise on the midwinter solstice. Warren Field in Scotland is approximately twice as old as Stonehenge, which was discovered in 1978. While Stonehenge is a more well-known site, it is believed to have been used for performing rituals at specific times of the year rather than as a means of keeping track of time. Nonetheless, it is still capable of revealing times of the equinoxes and solstices. Recent findings suggest that Stonehenge may have also been believed to possess curative and healing properties. Interpreting these sites can be challenging because they were constructed during a time when there were no written records. Archaeologists have analyzed the alignment and shape of the stones, as well as the contents of nearby burial sites, to determine the practices that were carried out there and to uncover any additional secrets that may be concealed within these sites. The Warren Field site in Scotland could have been used by hunters to determine when to start looking for specific types of migrating animals. In addition to providing information about when to plant or harvest crops, the pits may have also been used to guide hunters. History of the Babylonian calendar. The first cities were established between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which originate in the Taurus Mountains of southeastern Turkey. These rivers' headwaters diverge and flow south through Syria and Iraq, with several tributaries added from Iran before finally flowing into the Persian Gulf. Ur, founded approximately 3800 BCE, was once a coastal city. Due to changes in the landscape, it is now more than 200 kilometers away from the sea. The Ur3 Empire, at one point, would have extended up through much of modern Iraq, including several smaller cities. Clay tablets with cuneiform writing reveal that before Ur incorporated them, those cities would have had their own calendars with their own names for the months of the year. For instance, Nippur had months named Dew 6, Ku 33, or Shiny Mound, and Kindayana, or Work of Inanna. The city of Ummah had months that translated as harvest, barley is at the quay, and first fruit, offerings. Each of the cities had a month called extra, which enabled them to reset the calendar, just as a leap year does. The conquests of King Shulgan, who ruled in the 21st century BCE, united those calendars into the Ummah calendar, which became the foundation of the Babylonian calendar. The Ummah calendar had 12 months and a 13th month every 4 years. The calendar starts in the spring, around March or April in the Gregorian calendar, with Ara Nis Nu, the month of the sanctuary. This is followed by the month of the bull, which corresponds to the zodiac sign of Taurus. The 7th month is the month of the beginning, which begins the second half of the year, followed by the month of laying foundations. Babylonian weeks would not have been unfamiliar. Every 7th day was a rest day on which officials were prohibited from engaging in certain activities. For the Babylonian calendar, these same activities couldn't be done on the 28th day of each month either. On each rest day, Babylonians made offerings to a different god. The most peculiar aspect of a Babylonian month would have been the length of the last week. Each week lasted 7 days, but during the lunar cycle, the month, which lasted 29 or 30 days, made it so that the last week of each month lasted 8 or 9 days. The history of the Egyptian calendar. The Babylonian Empire existed from approximately 1896 BCE to 539 BCE and experienced its zenith during the reign of King Hammurabi, who ruled from 1792 BCE to 1750 BCE. During the same period when the Babylonians anticipated the extended weekend at the end of the month, the Egyptian Empire was expanding towards the west. There is a debate among scholars regarding the early Egyptian calendars that were based on the rising of Sirius or the presence of a 360-day year. Nevertheless, it is evident that as early as 3000 BCE, the Egyptians were interested in the annual cycle, particularly the yearly flooding of the Nile. The monsoon brings heavy rains to the Ethiopian highlands south of Egypt between May and August, according to the Gregorian calendar, and the waters flow into the Nile, causing it to flood. The size of the harvest was determined by the flooding. The floodwater was directed into fields through a system of dams and dikes to saturate the soil. The water that accumulated in the fields had to be enough to sustain the crops throughout the dry season. A low flood meant a poor harvest. The floods also dictated the year's pattern, and the Egyptians divided their calendar into 3 seasons. The flood season took place from approximately June to September when the Nile flooded, and the waters engulfed the fields. Emergence took place between October and January. Finally, the low water or harvest season occurred from February to May. During the early dynasties of Egyptian history, the months within those seasons were numbered as first month of the flood, second month of the flood, and so on. However, by the Middle Kingdom, the months had acquired names that have largely persisted through the New Kingdom and Greek calendars to the present-day Coptic calendar. The calendar according to the Nile. The year in ancient Egypt was divided into 3 periods based on the rise and fall of the Nile, which occurred regularly but were not entirely predictable, much like migratory birds were crucial to the hunter-gatherers of the Scottish Isles. While the movement of the sun, moon, and stars followed recognizable patterns, the arrival of the monsoon and the flight of storks depended on unpredictable weather systems that varied from year to year. Although the seasonal calendar enabled Egyptian farmers to anticipate the appropriate time to open their dams and plant their seeds, it was less helpful in predicting or marking other events that took place throughout the year. During the Old Kingdom period, when the pyramids were constructed, Egypt introduced a civil calendar based on the reappearance of Sirius, a star that returned to the sky about the same time as the Nile flooded. The civil year was made up of 12 months, each consisting of 30 days, with an additional month of 5 days, resulting in a year of 365 days. However, the absence of a leap year caused the movement of the stars to gradually fall out of sync with the names of the month. As Sirius moved backwards through the calendar, the Egyptians devised a Sothic cycle. Every 1,461 Egyptian civil years, Sirius would return to its original position in the calendar. The Roman calendar. After centuries of experimenting with various calendrical systems and ways of marking time, by the time of the Roman Empire's establishment, we had made significant progress. We had tried stone circles, stone markings, lunar calendars, and combinations of solar and lunar calendars. Despite all these efforts, we still struggled to get it right. The primary issue was that the Earth's revolution around the Sun could not be counted in whole days. When a civilization couldn't count an entire day, calendars worldwide would regularly fall out of sync with the seasons, stars, and the moon's movement. The earliest Roman calendars were not much better than most other calendars, but they had impressive tile work. They began as lunar calendars, tracking the moon's development over 29.5 days and losing only 10 or 11 days each year. Early Rome also had a nundinal cycle, which they derived from the Etruscans. It was an 8-day week that ended with a market or festival, and farmers would head to the city to buy and sell goods. On this day, children had no classes, and slave owners warned their property not to enjoy themselves too much. A year in early Rome consisted of 38 nundinal cycles, divided into 10 months of 30 or 31 days. While it is unclear how the Romans dealt with the remaining days, some scholars believe that the Romans disregarded them, while others suggest that the early Romans practiced intercalation. They inserted extra days into the calendar to fill the gap and ensure that the calendar didn't fall out of sync with the seasons. The Ides, the Calends, and the Nun, revised Roman calendar. The Romans revised their calendrical system after the end of their kingdom and the growth of the Roman Republic. They were influenced by Greek calendars that divided the year into 12 lunar months, alternating between 29 and 30 days. The Romans assigned 31 days to the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 10th months, while every other month had 29 days, except February, which had 28 days and 29 in each leap year. The Romans also carefully divided each month, calling the first of the month, Calends, the day before the middle of the month, Ides, and the 8 days before the Ides, Nones, or 9 days counting inclusively. These moments likely reflect the calendar's lunar origins and mark the sighting of the crescent moon, quarter moon, and full moon. We can now begin to comprehend some information about the foundation of the calendar that we use today. Notably, we see the use of an intercalary month in February to keep the months aligned with the seasons. However, the Roman calendar had one interesting difference. After the establishment of the Roman Republic, control over intercalation was passed to the high priests. They could adjust the number of days in February to lengthen or shorten the term of office of the consuls they supported. It was as if a political party could determine the length of a year and make the year longer when they were in office. Therefore, the priests could gerrymander the calendar. The history of the Julian calendar. Julius Caesar proposed a change to the Roman calendar in 48 BCE. This was due to the high priests manipulating the length of the year to favor their political allies, which caused the calendar to become out of sync with the actual year. This issue was exacerbated by events such as the Punic War against Carthage and the Civil Wars. Between 63 BCE and 46 BCE, only 5 intercalary months were added instead of 8, and none were added between 51 BCE and 46 BCE. This period is often referred to as the Years of Confusion by historians. Caesar, who had previously spent time in Egypt and knew the correct date, wanted to establish a more conventional way of maintaining the calendar. After returning from the African campaign in 46 BCE, Caesar added 2 intercalary months between November and December, making that year 67 days longer. The calendar in 46 BCE was 445 days long, as the year had already been extended from 355 to 378 days. The reform involved adding 10 days to each year, including 2 days to January, August, formerly known as Sextilis, and December, and 1 day to April, June, September, and November. February remained 28 days long. The new calendar eliminated the previous intercalary month and replaced it with a new leap day placed before the calends of March. Although Romans continued to mark calends, Ides, and Nones, this reform established the modern world's calendar pattern. How months were named. The calendar, which was introduced throughout the empire and neighboring states and client kingdoms, had 365 days and one leap day, which was initially added every 3 years but eventually every 4 years. The months' names mostly remained unchanged, with January honoring Janus, the god of new beginnings. Janus was known for having one head but 2 faces, one looking forward to the future and one looking back at the previous year. Each month was taken seriously and involved deep reflections, thoughts, concerns, and deliberations to come to a consensus of opinions. February likely originated from the Februa festival, while March was dedicated to the god Mars. The origins of April, May, and June are unclear, but they may have been derived from the Etruscan god Apro and the gods Maia and Juno, respectively. Another theory suggests that April comes from the Latin word aperire, meaning to open, while May and June were old terms for senior and junior. The remaining months were named after their order in the calendar, with Quintilis being the 5th month, Sextilis being the 6th, September being the 7th, October being the 8th, November being the 9th, and December being the 10th. The Julian reform pushed the months down the calendar, making December the 12th month but without changing its name. Quintilis, the birth month of Julius Caesar, became known as Iulius, or July in English, while Sextilis became Augustus or August. Other emperors, such as Caligula, Nero, and Domitian, attempted to rename months as well, but their attempts were unsuccessful. For instance, Caligula tried to call September Germanicus to honor his father, Nero wanted April to be called Neronius, and Domitian wanted October to become Domitianus. History of the Georgian calendar. The Julian calendar functioned reasonably well, however, it was not entirely accurate. The calendar operated under the assumption that a year consisted of precisely 365.25 days. Nevertheless, the Earth takes 365.2422 days to revolve around the Sun, and the difference of 11 minutes each year was sufficient to shift the calendar out of alignment with the equinoxes by approximately 3 days every 400 years. Saint Bede, an English Benedictine monk, had already noted that the calendar had moved by 3 days by the 8th century. 500 years later, Roger Bacon approximated that it was misaligned by approximately a week, and by 1300, Dante had mentioned the necessity for complete calendar reform. The calendar's drift proved problematic for the Church, as the date of the spring equinox determined the celebration of Easter, which the Church had established to fall on March 21st. By the 16th century, the equinox had moved back approximately 10 days. In 1545, work began on changing the calendar. The Council of Trent authorized Pope Paul III to adjust the dates so that the spring equinox matched the equinox during the First Council of Nicaea in 325. The Nicene Council had also requested a new method of keeping time to prevent Easter from drifting through the calendar again. How Aloysius Lilius fixed the calendar. Work during the 16th century was time-consuming despite the calendar's drawbacks. The Reform Commission requested mathematicians' contributions in 1577, and Aloysius Lilius, an Italian doctor and astronomer, submitted the winning proposal. According to his suggestion, the leap year should be cancelled for the next 40 years to allow the equinox to catch back up with the calendar. He then proposed a new formula to stabilize the calendar, stating that a day would only be added during a leap year if the year were divisible by 100 and 400. Thus, 1600 was a leap year, but 1700, 1800, and 1900 were not. The calendar was brought back into alignment regularly with these additions and subtractions, as a leap day was added on only 97 days out of every 400 rather than every 100 days. On Friday, October 15, 1582, during the papacy of Gregory XIII, the new calendar was adopted. The previous day was Thursday, October 4, according to the Julian calendar. Spain was the first to accept the new calendar, followed by Portugal, France, Poland, Italy, the Catholic Low Countries, and Luxembourg. The Kingdom of Bohemia adopted the calendar 2 years later, while Prussia accepted it in 1610. Protestant countries were more hesitant to adopt the calendar, fearing that it would bring them closer to Rome. As a result, Britain only chose to adopt the Gregorian calendar in 1752, while Greece waited until 1923 and Turkey until 1926. The Gregorian calendar rectified the Julian calendar's mistake of 1 day every 128 years, replacing it with an error of 1 day every 3030 years. Sir John Herschel, a 19th-century English mathematician, suggested that the calendar's accuracy could be improved by not making the year 4000 and its multiples a leap year. However, his suggestion was ignored. The local calendar still in use. Throughout the course of history, we have witnessed the evolution of calendars from basic stone formations used to anticipate the return of animals during solstice to intricate systems of star tracking and month counting. The evolution of calendars has largely been influenced by the struggles of various cultures and empires to create a standard way of counting days and months in a year. The biggest challenge was accounting for the extra quarter day that the Earth uses to make a full rotation around the Sun. Failure to do so would cause the calendar to slip through the year. Over time, calendars have also been given unique names for the months. The introduction of the Gregorian calendar marked the pinnacle of calendar development. Lilius's correction, which was introduced during the papacy of Gregory XIII, ensured that the year was always accurate and required little to no correction. The calendar's adoption across Christendom and beyond has led to the world sharing a single method of timekeeping. The continued use of Julian calendar. The marking of time isn't limited to the use of the calendar. There are various calendars still in use globally, not just the Gregorian calendar. Although people can locate the same date on the same calendar worldwide, other calendars are still used in different regions. In Greece's autonomous province of Mount Athos, the Julian calendar is still in use and holds authority. This province consists of 20 Orthodox monasteries, and women are prohibited from entering the island. Orthodox churches, and sometimes countries, still rely on the Julian calendar. These countries even declined to adopt a lunar calendar that would match the Gregorian calendar until the year 2800. The calendar was proposed at a synod, congress, committee, in Constantinople in 1923. Except for the Estonian and Finnish Orthodox churches still celebrate their Christian festivals according to the Julian calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. Traditional calendars are also still in use in other regions and religions. The Hebrew calendar. Israel has two calendars, the Gregorian calendar and the Hebrew calendar. The Gregorian calendar is used for secular activities such as scheduling school breaks, arranging business meetings, and celebrating birthdays. However, the Hebrew calendar determines the dates of religious festivals, which occur almost every month. Additionally, the Jewish calendar is used to decide which portion of the Torah will be read each Shabbat and to determine the dates of memorials for deceased relatives. The Hebrew calendar is strongly influenced by the Babylonian calendar, which came about because of Jewish exile in Babylon that ended in the 6th century BCE. Before the exile, the Hebrew calendar consisted of 10 months, each with 30 days. Only 4 months were mentioned in the Bible: Aviv, Spring, Ziv, Ethanim, and Bul. These names are believed to be Canaanite. After the Babylonian exile, the names of the months were changed to match the Babylonian calendar more closely. One key difference between the Gregorian and Hebrew calendars is the way the days are measured. In the Hebrew calendar, a day starts at sunset, meaning that Shabbat starts on Friday evening and ends the following day when the sun sets. Another important difference is how the months are measured. The Gregorian calendar is solar and based on the sun's relative position to the stars. In contrast, the Hebrew calendar is a lunisolar calendar, meaning that the months are based on lunar months, taking into consideration the phases of the moon, and the years are based on solar years. The Hebrew calendar consists of 12 lunar months, with each month lasting either 29 or 30 days. The Buddhist calendar. The Buddhist calendar follows the lunisolar system and is primarily used in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. It has many variations and versions in countries around the world. This calendar is mainly used for Theravada Buddhist festivals, and there is no official Buddhist calendar status anymore. It keeps track of the movements of both the moon and the sun, and it mostly follows the Hindu calendar. Due to the sidereal year, and the 19-year cycle used to determine the distribution of leap years based on the length of a tropical year, this calendar is somewhat inaccurate when reflecting the length of a solar year and the onset of the seasons. The Metonic calendar. The Hebrew calendar has a lunar year that is 12 months long, while a solar year is 11 days longer. This difference causes the holidays to fall out of sync with the seasons and requires the addition of leap months to correct it. Unlike the Gregorian calendar, which adds a leap month every 4 years, the Hebrew calendar adds 7 leap months every 19 years, following the Metonic cycle. Meton of Athens, inspired by the Babylonians, first discovered that 19 years is almost equal to 6,940 days. In addition to the Metonic cycle, the calendar also adjusts to ensure that Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, never falls immediately before or after Shabbat. The month of Kislev can lose a day, while the month of Cheshvan can add a day. Despite its complexity, the Hebrew calendar is mainly used to mark Jewish holidays, with the dates appearing at the top of newspapers. The Islamic calendar. The Jewish calendar tries to stay synchronized with the solar calendar while also adjusting the duration of its months. To ensure that a holiday fixed by month does not coincide with a holiday fixed by week, the calendar needs to make these adjustments. On the other hand, the Islamic calendar takes a simpler approach and does not make any corrections. It consists of 12 lunar months that add up to 354 or 355 days in total, which accounts for the difference with the 365.25 days of the solar year. As a result, the Islamic calendar experiences a shift of around 10 days each year, and its cycle repeats only every 33 lunar years. Due to this variation, Ramadan, the month of fasting, can occur in either summer or winter, depending on the position of the calendar. For this reason, most Islamic countries use the Gregorian calendar for civil events and only rely on the Islamic calendar for religious holidays. However, Iran and Afghanistan are exceptions to this rule and use the solar Hijri calendar for both civil and religious events. The Hijri year. The Islamic calendar is based on the Hijri year, which was established when Muhammad and his followers migrated from Mecca to Medina to form the first Muslim community. This event occurred in 622 AD and marked the beginning of the annual count. The year 2019 in the Gregorian calendar corresponds to the year 1440 in the Islamic calendar. The Hebrew calendar, on the other hand, designates this year as 5779. The Islamic calendar consists of 12 months, with each month starting at the start of a new lunar cycle. Each month has its own significance. For months, Rajab, Wadu al-Qadati, Wadu al-Hujjati, and Muharram are considered sacred. Ramadan is a month of fasting. Shawwal means raised and is said to be when camels are in calf, with calf, meaning they are pregnant. Shaban means scattered and marks the time when Arab tribes scatter to find water. Dhu al-Hijjah is the time when the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, is performed. 2 countries, 2 months. The calendar faces and creates a challenge in that most Muslim countries determine the start of a new month by observing the rise of the new moon. Each country has its own way of observation. However, due to the sun setting later as you move towards the west, it may be easier or harder to observe the moon in one place than another. As a result, 2 Muslim countries may find themselves in different months at the same time. Efforts have been made to overcome this problem. Malaysia, for instance, is among several countries that begin the month not when they see the new moon but at sunset on the first day of that moonset after the sunset. Some representative bodies have expressed their intention to use calculations instead of observations to determine the months, but not all associations have agreed, and not all those who have declared an intention have followed through with it. Considering the complexity of this matter, it's not only the Islamic calendar that is misaligned with the solar year and the Gregorian calendar, but it's also sometimes out of sync with other users of the Islamic calendar. The Chinese calendar. The Chinese calendar is not simply a means of measuring time but rather a way of assigning personality traits based on an individual's date of birth. The Chinese calendar is based on the zodiac and is particularly noteworthy for the grand celebration that occurs at the beginning of each year, usually in February. This calendar is too significant to overlook as it commands the attention of over 1 billion people who take a New Year holiday every year. Although the Western astrological calendar associates 12 signs with the constellations present in the sky at the time of an individual's birth, the Chinese calendar rotates 12 animals through the years. One ancient tale provides an explanation for the order in which these animals appear. According to the story, the Jade Emperor announced that the first animal to cross a river would be listed first in the calendar, and so on, until all 12 animals had been accounted for. The cat and the rat requested the ox's assistance in getting across the river. However, the rat pushed the cat into the water when they reached the bank, and the rat came first. The tiger arrived after the ox, followed by the rabbit, which hopped from rock to rock and then onto a log that floated to the shore. The dragon came in 5th place since it had stopped to bring rain to a village before blowing the rabbit's log to the shore. The horse followed, with the snake clinging to its hoof. The snake took 6th place, while the horse was 7th. The rooster discovered a raft, which it shared with the monkey and the goat. The goat was 8th, the monkey 9th, and the rooster 10th. What happened to the cat? Unfortunately, the rat had pushed it into the river, and it drowned. This is a lovely story, except for the cat's part, and the Chinese calendar continues to play a vital role in modern Chinese culture. This calendar's greatest significance is that it marks the country's most significant holiday, and people know which animal corresponds to their birth year. What many people may not realize, however, is that each sign coincides with a month and season of the year, like the Western astrological signs. For example, the tiger corresponds to Aquarius and Pisces and runs from early February to early March. The dragon indicates Aries and Taurus and runs from early April to early May. Even the days of the week are associated with zodiac animals: Monday with the goat, Tuesday with the dragon and pig, Wednesday with the horse and rooster, and so on. It is primarily the Chinese calendar that tells you when to light fireworks and what sort of decorations to use in February. Mesoamerican calendar. Mesoamerica has also developed its own indigenous calendrical systems alongside Europe and Asia. Some of these calendars are still being used today, particularly in certain highland regions of Guatemala and Mexico. However, the most common calendar in Mesoamerican cultures is a ritual calendar that lasts for 260 days, which is not related to any astronomical movements or farming cycles. The origin of this calendar is unclear, though it may be linked to the settlement of Izapa in Mexico, which experiences 260 days between the sun's two zeniths each year. Alternatively, it may be attributed to the Mayas' fascination with the numbers 13 and 20. Another theory is that it's related to the length of human pregnancy, but this is still uncertain. The Mayans named their calendar Tzolk'in, which consisted of 20 days associated with 13 numbers. There were no months or weeks, but each day had a name and a number, aligned with a natural phenomenon such as death or crocodile. Glyphs on stone carvings represented each day. Similarly, the Aztecs called their calendar Tonalpwali, meaning count of days, in Nahuatl. It also combined a 20-day cycle called Venenas, with a 13-day period called Trecenas. Each day was associated with a glyph of an Aztec deity such as Quetzalcoatl or Mayahul. The Tonalpwali consisted of only 260 days, but the Aztecs had another calendar called Xiuhpohualli, which was closer to the solar calendar. It had 18 months, each lasting 20 days, with an extra 5-day period. The year amounted to 365 days, and the Xiuhpohualli aligned with the Tonalpwali every 52 years. The modern calendar. Throughout history, calendars have always been important in civilizations worldwide, as they help us understand time and our place in the universe. Although there have been many calendars in use for thousands of years, the Gregorian calendar has become the most widely used and accepted calendar worldwide, allowing people from anywhere to synchronize their times with anyone else on the planet. While about 40 different calendars are still in use, they are mostly used to mark religious events rather than secular occasions. The presentation format of calendars has undergone significant changes over time. Early man created the first calendars using stone to mark the solstice and track the migration of animals, but these calendars were challenging to modify or adapt to changing circumstances. As a result, they were not easily movable, and people had to visit places like Stonehenge or Warren Field to determine the time of year. Fortunately, today's calendars are much more convenient. While some designers have come up with creative ways to mark dates, days, and months, most calendars are either paper or digital. The astronomical basis of the calendar. All calendars rely on astronomical cycles, but these cycles are not consistent in duration and cannot be accurately predicted over very long periods of time. This means that calendars are not entirely reliable, and even direct observations made to maintain accuracy can be subject to error. To address this, calendars are usually based on rules that aim to provide a close approximation of astronomical cycles over a given period. Day. It is observed from the surface of the Earth that the Sun appears on the eastern horizon and disappears below the western horizon. The occurrence of day and night is due to the Earth's rotation on its axis in a direction from west to east when viewed from above the North Pole. The duration of a day depends on the point of reference used to measure a complete rotation. Day's length according to the Sun. As seen from the Earth's surface, the sky appears to form a dome-like hemisphere where all celestial objects, including the Sun, Moon, planets, and stars, move across. Throughout the day, an observer would witness the Sun's ascent during the morning and descent during the afternoon, reaching its highest point at local noon. At this point, in the northern hemisphere, the Sun's shadows are at their shortest and point precisely towards true north. Recording the length of day based on the Sun's movements is known as an apparent solar day. However, timing two successive occasions where the shadows are shortest would rarely result in exactly 24 hours due to a difference in length between the shortest and longest apparent solar day, which can be as much as 16 minutes. Apparent solar time is a measure of the Earth's rotation relative to the Sun. However, in the modern world, it would be challenging to adapt our lives around a constantly changing day length. Instead, our clocks and watches keep a mean time based on the length of an average apparent solar day over the year, known as the mean solar day, which lasts 24 hours. The length of the apparent solar day changes from day to day due to a couple of factors. Firstly, the Earth's orbit around the Sun is an ellipse rather than a perfect circle, which means that the distance between the Earth and the Sun varies throughout the year. For example, in January, the Earth is closest to the Sun, whereas in July, it is furthest away. Secondly, the Earth rotates around an axis that is tilted, causing the height of the Sun in the sky to change over the year. In summer, the Sun is higher in the sky at local noon, while in winter, it is lower. These two factors work together to alter the apparent speed of the Sun as it moves across the sky at different times of the year, ultimately affecting the length of the day. The day length according to the star. We observe that stars behave similarly to the Sun during the day on a clear night. They ascend from the eastern horizon and move across the sky until they set somewhere in the west. Every star will eventually reach its highest point in the sky as it crosses the local meridian. Astronomers use a transit instrument to record the exact moment that a star transits the local meridian. This instrument is a telescope that is stationary and can only point at a narrow strip of sky that aligns with the local meridian. The telescope can be adjusted in altitude and aimed at any star that becomes briefly visible in the narrow field of view. The time between two successive transits of a star is the duration of a day measured by the stars. It is the length of time it takes for the Earth to rotate and bring the star back to the same position in the sky it occupied on the previous night. This is known as the sidereal day, which lasts just over 23 hours and 56 minutes. Since the sidereal day is shorter than 24 hours, the stars rise 4 minutes earlier every night according to our watches. This is why we observe different constellations in the night sky at different times of the year. Months. The Earth's natural satellite, the Moon, completes one orbit around our planet in a month. As it moves in its orbit, it changes its position relative to the Sun, which affects the portion of its face that is visible to an observer on the Earth's surface. This phenomenon results in the different phases of the moon. When the moon is closest to the sun in the sky, none of its illuminated sides is visible to us, making it a new moon. We can only see it if there's a solar eclipse, which is a rare event when part or all of the moon's disk moves in front of the sun. As the moon moves farther away from the sun, a small sliver of its illuminated face becomes visible, creating a waxing crescent moon. This phase is usually seen in the western horizon just after sunset, and it sets relatively quickly. As the moon continues in its orbit, it moves even further away from the sun, illuminating a larger fraction of its Earth-facing side, which sets later. By the seventh day, the moon is in the first quarter, so called because it has completed 1/4 of its orbit, though it appears like a half-moon. When the moon completes half of its orbit, it's opposite the sun in the sky, and its entire illuminated side is visible to us. This is called a full moon, and it rises at sunset and sets at sunrise, so it's visible throughout the night. The waning moon looks like it's shrinking because it's getting closer to the sun. A golden quarter moon rises around midnight and stays high in the sky until the next morning. Contrary to popular belief, the moon is not just visible at night. The synodic month, which is the time between one new moon and the next, is approximately 29.5 days and is based on the moon's phases. Years. The regular cycle of 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, is experienced by people living at mid and high latitudes. In contrast, at low latitudes, in the tropics, the temperature remains relatively constant, and there are distinct wet and dry seasons. The progression of the seasons was integral to ancient people in finding or growing food and would have spurred them on to determine the lengths of the year and the seasons. One of the ways this problem was tackled was by observing the position of the sun and how its position shifts in the sky throughout the seasons. There is considerable archaeological evidence that this was undertaken independently by numerous cultures worldwide in prehistoric times. The seasons. Exploring the cause of the seasons requires understanding the Earth's rotation axis, which is tilted at an angle of 23.5 degrees from the vertical, known as obliquity. As the Earth orbits around the Sun throughout the year, the Sun's rays hit first one pole and then the other, resulting in the seasons, as depicted in the animation below. June 21st marks the summer solstice, during which the North Pole of the Earth tilts most towards the Sun. This causes the Sun to be directly overhead at latitude 23.5 degrees north, the Tropic of Cancer, at local noon. This day is often called Midsummer's Day, despite being considered by astronomers as the start of summer, as it is the longest day of the year. The Northern Hemisphere experiences warmer temperatures in summer than in winter because the sun's rays are more concentrated when they strike the Earth and because the sun is above the horizon for a longer period. Conversely, during this time, those in the Southern Hemisphere experience midwinter because the South Pole is tilted furthest away from the sun. By about September 22nd, the Earth orbits anticlockwise and reaches the autumn equinox, signifying the start of autumn. Currently, neither pole is tilted towards the sun, and the sun is directly overhead at the equator, latitude 0 degrees, at local noon. All places on Earth experience equal amounts of daylight and night, hence the term equinox, which means equal nights. Only during the autumn and spring equinoxes does the sun rise due east and set due west. On December 21st, the Earth experiences the winter solstice, during which the North Pole is tilted furthest away from the sun, and it is now overhead at local noon at latitude 23.5 degrees south, the Tropic of Capricorn. This marks the shortest day of the year, with the sun rising to its lowest altitude above the horizon for Northern Hemisphere observers. Astronomers consider this as the beginning of winter, but it is often referred to as Midwinter's Day. Since the sun's rays are more spread out and the sun is above the horizon for only a shorter duration in winter, it is colder. During this time, people in the southern hemisphere experience summer when it is winter in the northern hemisphere. Spring begins on the vernal equinox, which occurs around March 21st. As with the autumn equinox, daylight and night are of equal length everywhere, and the sun is directly overhead at the equator at local noon. The number of daylight hours changes throughout the year, with the UK experiencing more daylight hours in summer than in winter. However, the number of hours of daylight and darkness we experience each day varies depending on latitude. At the equator, days and nights are equally long throughout the year. Conversely, for those living at the North Pole, the sun is above the horizon for half the year during the Northern Hemisphere summer but never rises during the Northern Hemisphere winter. This is the opposite at the South Pole, where day and night last around 6 months each. For latitudes between the equator and the poles, the difference between daylight hours and darkness at midsummer and midwinter increases as latitude increases. Sun's journey through the sky. The path of the sun through the sky varies throughout the year due to the Earth's tilt, and this path is known as the ecliptic. The celestial equator, the equivalent of Earth's equator, is where the ecliptic intersects, and it is where the equinoxes are located on the celestial sphere. During the spring equinox, the sun moves northward along the ecliptic, crossing the celestial equator as summer approaches for northern observers. In contrast, during the winter equinox, the sun moves southward across the celestial equator, resulting in a lower position in the sky for northern observers and a higher position for southern observers who are anticipating their summer. Calendars have historically been developed based on the duration of one cycle of the seasons. The tropical year, which is defined as the time between two successive vernal equinoxes, is commonly used in modern astronomy. The term tropical comes from the Greek word tropo, meaning to turn, referring to the sun's movement from south to north and back again during the year of the seasons. Although the calculation methods may differ, all methods agree that the current length of the year of the seasons is 365.242 civil days, rounded to 3 decimal places. The sidereal year, which is the time taken for the Earth to complete one orbit with respect to the fixed stars, was equal to 365.2564 mean solar days in 2000. Over the course of a year, an observer can see every constellation of stars visible from their latitude due to the sidereal year. The figure below illustrates how the sidereal year works. In the Northern Hemisphere summer, the North Pole is lit by the sun, and an observer on Earth can see only stars in direction 3, such as the zodiacal constellation Scorpius, because the stars in direction 1 are on the day side and hence not visible. 6 months later, during the Northern Hemisphere winter, stars in direction 1, e.g. the zodiacal constellation Taurus, become visible in the night sky, while stars in direction 3 are only up during daylight hours. The stars in direction 2, e.g., Leo, are visible in spring, while those in direction 4, e.g., Pisces, are visible in autumn. Alternatively, we can think of the sidereal day, the day length measured according to how the Earth rotates in relation to the stars, which is shorter than 24 hours, meaning the stars rise 4 minutes earlier each night according to our watches. Over 30 days, the stars rise 120 minutes or 2 hours earlier, and over 12 by 30 days, the stars rise 24 hours earlier. Several ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, Babylonians, and Greeks, have used sidereal, star, calendars based on the constellation's slow progress across the sky over the year.